Hello, I'm Julia Hankins, and I create resources and training and provide mentoring for kids yoga teachers. And today I want to talk to you all about my number one thing that I use in every single yoga class that I deliver. So, whether I'm in a community class or in schools or whether I'm doing a family workshop, there is one thing that will always be with me in my bag. What is it? It's yoga cards, or as I like to call them, well-being cards. And so I wanted to talk about today why I think they're really powerful, and also talk about why I created my own. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody else has a bit of an unhealthy obsession with kids' yoga cards. Because before I created my own, I had pretty much all of the ones that were on the market. No, I'm not going to say the names of them, but I think you know the ones I mean, little boxes. Well, some of them come in little boxes, some of them in packets. I think I had pretty much every kids yoga card on the planet. um, and I loved using them in my kids yoga classes, but I found them a real source of frustration for me. And so in the end, I ended up creating my own ones. And this is because I found that the cards that I had access to were too small in size for the groups of children that I teach. A lot of my classes, I'd say the vast majority of my kids yoga classes, are in full classes now in school time, so 30 children approximately. And so these little cards, although they're very beautiful and really well illustrated and really inviting for children, were really just too small. The imagery was too small, so that didn't work for me. And another issue was that the number of poses that were provided weren't enough for the types of work that I do. So I work with schools for long periods of time, and I have quite a few annual contracts where I work with children, the same children, over a number of years. And there just wasn't the progression there. There wasn't the depth and the range of poses to captivate the children who I was teaching repeatedly over a number of years. And so I was having to mix and match in different poses from different packs, and then that I didn't like that. That really messed with my head, that they're just of different images, different names, different sizes, different types of cards, and we'd use them one week and it would be called chair, and then another week it was called volcano, and it was getting really confusing, and the children were confused and I was confused, and I didn't feel like my lessons were progressive enough for me to feel like I was being professional in schools. And yeah, so they could be confusing. And another thing that was a bit of an issue for me was that I had found some cards that were larger, but there wasn't the diversity of children represented that I would like. So I teach in inner city schools, and the children who I teach are a broad spectrum of diversity in terms of cultural background, in terms of body shape and size, in terms of abilities and disabilities, and in terms of gender expression. And so I really didn't feel like the imagery that was included in the cards that I had were representative enough for the children that I taught. And so I decided to create my own. And so I worked with a really lovely illustrator called Sophie Ray, and we worked together to well, she created the images and I created the progression and the poses. I didn't create the poses, but I drew them all together, and I drew the kind of progression route way together and created all of the ideas behind it. And so I really love my well-being cards, and I prefer to call them well-being cards for two reasons. So the first reason is that they have loads of ideas on the back of them, and not all of these ideas are necessarily strictly yoga. And the second reason is because, actually, there's a few reasons. I also don't feel like some of the things that are expected in a kids yoga class in school are necessarily yoga, because as we know, there are many aspects to yoga, and in the classes we're mainly focusing on movement and then breathing, which is only two of the limbs of the 8 limbs of yoga. And the third reason why I love calling them well-being cards rather than yoga cards is because some people have a tricky relationship with the word yoga, and this could be because of their perception of it being linked to religion, and so that can really limit the types of people that can access and use the cards, and I want them to be accessible by everyone, so I call them well-being cards. So my number one prop, why do I use it every single time? So there's 3 main reasons why I think kids yoga cards are just the ultimate prop that should be in your kids yoga bag, whether they're my ones or whether they're somebody else's. I do think they're really useful for you to use. And so the first reason is because they engage children, they excite them, and they build safety and familiarity. And so the children on the cards, I'm just going to pick one for an example. So here's my lovely rainbow friend. And so a common thing that children will say in my kids' classes are they'll comment on the clothing, they'll comment on who the child reminds them of. They have their favourites. They have ones that some of them have even given them little names and things, but this is a really popular one because my rainbow friend has a rainbow pattern top on, and so they really love that. Oh, it's my rainbow friend. And so it helps them to feel safe in the session because they're familiar. They're a grounded thing that they know, I'm going to use these cards every single session, and they're like, oh yeah. And so obviously I teach different poses each week or focus on different ones each week, but I will weave in the poses that they already know, and so they become like old friends or like familiar characters, like in a film or a book or a game, that they feel comfortable with and they feel safe with. And so this helps to kind of build this kind of feeling of safety in my classes because the children are used to those characters. So that's the first reason, because it engages them, it excites them, and builds a feeling of safety. My second reason for really loving to use yoga cards is because it helps to attach a visual image. It helps to attach like a memory to a particular movement or pose. And so as educators, we should be providing in our lessons a number of different ways for children to help remember and help learn what it is that we're delivering. And when we are giving a visual image, then it helps to attach that learning. It helps them to kind of tag it in their brain as a way of remembering. And so, for example, if we're doing elephant in our classes, the children will remember that the person on the card, and they'll also remember the name of it, and they'll just attach it in their brain. So even if they don't look anything like the pose, which they won't, because our bodies are different, so the yoga poses will look different to everybody, but they will remember the imagery that's attached to it. And so they could be doing elephant pose or uttanasana or ragdoll or whatever it is you're calling it. They could do this position with their arms hanging down or with their hands interlaced and swooshing their trunk backwards and forwards or swaying from side to side. Their hands could be down on the floor. They could be holding their elbows. They could even be holding behind their legs if they wanted to. But the image, they would still be in this forward fold. Or even if you have a child in a wheelchair, or if you are doing a seated class for that particular day and you were all sitting down on a chair, you would still be forming this arching shape here. And so it would still be that lovely forward fold. And so the image of a child doing that position, however different it is to what you're actually doing, helps support and helps that memory and helps it to really attach. So it helps children to remember, but also it supports children who have got language barriers. And so if you're teaching in schools, actually not even if you're teaching in schools, if you're teaching children, there is a whole host of things that can impact children and on how they remember things and the language that they're accessing. And so it could be that they have English as an additional language. It could be that they have speech and language issues. It could be that they're hearing impaired. It could be that they have ADHD and they're easily distracted by stuff. By providing visual images and visual imagery, you're helping that child to access the learning. And you're also having some sort of like common language between the two of you. So I teach a lot of children who come from other countries, and quite often they're newly arrived, which means they haven't been in England long. And so sometimes it can be awkward because you can talk to them and they can look uncomfortable because they're not sure what you're saying and you're not sure what they're saying. But if you have a visual image like a card, then that can really support the learning. And so, yeah, that's my second reason, which is the valuable visual image on the card helps to support. And so my third reason why I really love them is very similar to the second reason, and that is it's a really useful learning tool. And so, as well as them helping, the visual images are helping, the cards themselves are like a tool that you're using to up level your teaching. And so that might look like children using the cards themselves to organise them, to get them into a flow. It could look like children using partner cards. I created my own partner cards to go along with the pose cards so that they've got that physical, that in front of them that they can refer to. And that's why I created those partner cards. So they've got them there as a physical thing to support them in their learning. And it can help them to organise sequences. It can help them to compare poses and look at the differences between them. It can help them to think about how they're holding their bodies. So, for example, if we have a pose that I like to call cactus, I could be talking about the way that we ideally would like. Obviously it's not going to be the same for everybody, but ideally we'd like the elbow in line with the shoulder. And ideally we'd like a right angle here in between our shoulder and our hand. And that's easy to do when you've got a card to show that and everybody can see that. But if you're trying to teach it yourself and you're in the position yourself and you're like, oh, look at it, you can't actually, while you're talking, it can be a bit confusing and you may not actually be in the perfect position yourself because you're thinking about what it is that you're doing. And so having that visual aid can support, and it's things like if you were doing for example camel, and we'd be talking about the hips, and maybe can you have your hips above the knees, and so it's not about leaning back, it's about pushing forward, so you can talk about the kind of physical elements that there are to the pose. And if the children can see the cards with big images and with smaller images in front of them, then this can really help them to cement in, okay, this is the feature of the pose. We're thinking about opening up our chest. We're thinking about strengthening our, whatever it is. But the images can really help provide a useful learning tool. And so, that's why I really love using yoga cards, and they're my number one tool. I use them in every single class. I'm never without them. And in fact, I could be without any other props. But if I had my yoga cards, I would feel confident in delivering a lesson because they are my number one tool. And so, have you got some kids yoga cards? Maybe you could think about using them in your classes and thinking about how they can support the learning to be a useful learning tool for the children, and how you can help it as a communication tool or a visual image between for the children to attach their learning to. And also it helps to engage and excite and build safety. So you may be wondering about my cards and whether it's possible for you to get these, and I'm really excited to announce that I am now at a position to be able to have them for sale online. It's been a long road actually, because I experimented for a while having them printed and laminated for people, but the production costs were just too great to pass on. And so now it is possible to buy these online. And I would really love to invite you to my upcoming training, which is called Captivate with Cards. And so the training is on August the 27th. And not only will you learn how to use wellbeing cards in your classes effectively, but you'll also get the cards as PDFs so that you can download them, you can print them in any way that you like. So you could choose to print them as A4 like I do, or you could enlarge them onto posters. So you could have these partner cards, you could have it as an A3 poster, for example, if you wanted to. Or you could print multiple cards per page and have them as smaller cards. And so little packs of cards that children can use individually if you wanted to. And so, yeah, so if you book onto the training, you can get all of the PDFs, which include, there's actually, I'm going to tag in a video into this video where you can see all of the cards that are included. So there's the postcards that are shown in there. There's the partner cards. There's really lovely alphabet card. There are some, there's the same cards but without names, because I feel like a big issue for me is that the cards are called different things by different people, and the children may already know a pose and call it something different to you anyway. So for example, this one could be it could be a parrot, it could be one of the warriors, it could be an aeroplane, it could be, there's so many different names. And because you've got this blank here, you can write on it and wipe it off. And so you get all of the PDFs of all of the cards, and you would also, if you join the live training, or if you purchase the live training, then you get to shape the way the training is. So what that means is you can email me with any questions ahead of the training. And before and during and after the training, you can ask questions too, because what's going to happen is when I've delivered the training, I'm going to convert it into an e-course. And so all of the modules I can add into the modules of the e-course with your questions. So if you buy the training now, then firstly, you'll get it for less than half price. Secondly, you'll be able to shape the training and have your questions answered before, during and after. You'll get all of the PDFs that you can download and print, as well as a manual to support you. And when it's converted to, firstly, the recording, it will be live online. If you can't come live, that's totally fine. You can get a recording, and I send the recording the day after the training. And then when it gets converted into an e-course, those of you who have joined the live course will have access to the e-course and any added things that I put in afterwards for no additional cost, and you'll get lifetime access to that. And so buying the course now will mean that you lock in a cost that is less than half price of what it will be, and any future costs that go up, and you'll have access to all of the lovely PDFs. So if you'd like to see what's included in the bundle, I'll include that in the comments. If you'd like to learn more about the training and book on, I'll include that in the comments. And if you've got any questions, email me, julia@juliahankins.co.uk. And yeah, so the important dates are the discounted tickets for the training that are less than a half price are going to be available until the 23rd of August. The live training is on the 27th of August from 10 a.m. till 11:30 a.m. UK time. The recording will be emailed to those of you who are booked on they'll be emailed the day after, and the e-course login will be shared as soon as it's available. And so if you would like to use yoga cards in your lessons to make them really progressive, really professional, and to feel really competent and confident in your kids yoga classes, then book onto our training. And I would really love to see you there. Thanks for watching. I'd also love to know what you think of yoga cards yourself.